Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Good morning. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show. Thank you so much for taking time to be on this show.
Hi, Jag. Nice to meet you.
Likewise, Kathy. Kathy, as is going through your LinkedIn profile a little bit before the podcast, and you've been in the teaching domain for quite some time now. So I'll start off by asking you, how did you get into teaching? Was that your plan all along?
No, it was actually my second career. I have a bachelor's in finance, and I graduated in 1984 and promptly made my way to New York City and got a nice little job there. I was kind of a math nerd even then, and the the company where I got my job, they took the people that were really good in math and put them in the bond department as opposed to the stock trading stuff. So I started out as like a 24-year-old, novice managing bond portfolios in New York City. And I stayed there a little while, and it's a totally different vibe than teaching. I didn't know that at the time, but it's high paced and everything's about money and, very different.
Yeah.
So I'm from Miami, Florida. And after a few years in New York, I was a little burnt out, even though I was still kind of young. And I moved back to Miami, and I got a job in finance there as well for a few more years. And at that point, I decided I'm not motivated by this career, really. I needed something more. So I went back to graduate school and got a master's in secondary math education at University of Miami. And that's when I really started teaching. I was almost 30 years old when I started teaching. So, and I became a high school math teacher at that time at a really, really good college preparatory school in Miami. And it's probably one of the best college prep schools in the Southeast United States. It's really good. It's called Ransom Everglades. So it was sort of a happy accident that I landed that job, because that sort of catapulted my private tutoring business. I left the classroom because, a number of things, but I didn't know that I was going to leave permanently at that moment. That was in 1994. And, but math tutoring is such a high demand subject. It's different from history tutoring or English tutoring,
Right.
And I wanted to just see if I could make a living just doing tutoring, right? So I resigned from my teaching job. I had been tutoring part-time. I did it even through graduate school. So it wasn't like brand new for me, but could I make a living at this, a full-time living? And yes, I did. And I never went back to the classroom. And because I had that teaching job at this private kind of elite, school, I had a pipeline of students whose parents are willing to pay a lot of money for their children's education. So probably if I had started in a public school, maybe my trajectory would have been different. But it turned out that I didn't have to advertise. It was word of mouth. Even the teachers at the school would send me students, and that was almost 30 years ago, 29 years ago. And even to this day, I still have referrals. My business is different because I moved from Miami, and I do tutoring by Zoom now. But before, it was in-person tutoring, face-to-face in my apartment or in their house. There was no Zoom back then. There was nothing.
Yeah.
So you had to sit next to the student and write on paper and talk. So, that's my path. And I love it. I mean, I love being able to help students, and I love the subject. You had asked me when you first approached me about SAT tutoring, and
Yeah.
I could have certainly done that.
Yeah.
There's a huge, right? But I shied away from it. I just don't enjoy doing it. I have, it's kind of boring as a teacher for me because for me, I know the money is good, it's lucrative, but it didn't motivate me. I really just like to help kids do well in school and not, and like learn to appreciate the subject and not just like, oh, I got to do well on this stupid test. And, it's learning how to take a test, really. So I never really got into that. But these days I'm sort of semi-retired. I turned 60 this year, and I because I don't really want to tutor that much, honestly. I just kind of made my niche as a calculus tutor now because I love teaching calculus. So I have enough, there's enough students that need just calculus. And when somebody calls me about, let's say, geometry or pre-algebra, I sort of shy away from it at this point. I used to teach every subject, but so yeah, that's my 30-year history of leaving the world of finance and becoming a math teacher
Got it,
slash
Kathy.
tutor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Before we proceed, I just have a small request.
Sure.
You're kind of leaning towards your right. If you can just move slightly to your left, you'll be more central. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that. Yeah,
Okay.
that's perfect. Uh, Great. So, you said that first job that you got when you were 24 in New York City as in the bond department was a while. The thing that it reminded me was Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not sure if you've seen that movie,
Oh, I
but
was there at that time. Yes.
oh
I was
yeah, okay,
80s. That was in the 80s, right? And it was I wasn't in that type of firm or department, but I knew those people, they existed, and it was a crazy time. And being single woman, 24 in New York, like I saw it, but thank God I didn't like get into it, myself. I mean, yeah, it was insane, really. There was
got
those
it.
drugs, there was everything.
Right, right. Yeah, it is quite a vibe. And oh, what a difference, right? I mean, from that to teaching. And talking about which, you said you got into teaching at a school, and then, or did you directly get into that elite test prep company?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So you said, you got to know that that's not what you want to be doing, your first job, and then you went
Hmm.
on to do your higher education in the math secondary education domain, and then did you directly get into that elitist test prep company, or were you working in a school, and was that your side hustle?
I When you say company, do you mean my tutoring business?
No, you joined a company that was helping students prepare for test prep. You remember the private company? I lost the name. Everglades or Roseglades?
No, that's a school. That's a
Oh, that okay.
that's a
Okay, got
private
it.
school. Yeah.
Oh, got it.
They have
Okay,
it goes from here in the United States. I don't know if the grades are the same in India, but it had two campuses. The middle school was sixth grade to eighth grade, and the upper school where I taught was ninth to 12th. So I taught, and we call that's high school. So yeah,
right,
it's a private school. Parents pay big tuition for their
right,
for their children to go there,
right.
as
Got it.
opposed to like the public school system in the United States. You don't pay money to go. I don't know if it's the same in India, but
It
oh, it is.
is. We have equivalent to public school system in India, but majority of them kind of choose the private schools here.
Yeah.
It's very common for you to see students in India attend private schools, which itself is not very expensive. The expensive schools are very rare. So the majority of the Indian students go to private schools, and extremely low income groups go to the public school system here in India, which is called as government schools.
Government schools, yeah. You guys, I
Yeah.
mean, every person from India that I've ever met is so well educated. So you guys must be doing something right, you know?
Oh, that could be a small sample size because you also need to, you know that we are huge in number. The
I
population
know,
is
a
just
billion
too
people.
much. I'm not sure how much we'd be if you take as a percentage, because if you just have to judge Indians that come to the US, I don't think that's the right way to look at it. So it's a very
Yeah,
skewed sort of a
yeah.
POV. Yeah, that's how I'd say.
But I've met some.
Okay,
I've met some that still live in India as well, like through like this kind of situation. Maybe,
right,
yeah.
right.
Anyway,
Yeah, no, I get it, Kathy. Because just because of the sheer number of us, right? Yeah, it's quite crazy that. Yeah, but I get it why you think like that. But the numbers are very different here in terms of percentage. Because most of the population in India are in the rural places, and there's a very slim percentage of people that are in the urban centers that who are kind of educated and stuff like that. I'm not trying to say that the rural people aren't educated, but not as much as the urban ones.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I get what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. And Kathy, you said you started your own business. So that was from you did your stint at the private school, and after that you were on your own. Is that correct?
Yeah, I like I said, I had through graduate school, I tutored a little bit, just to make extra money, but I didn't have like a business plan or anything like that. In fact, I was at University of Miami for my master's, and they had a tutoring lab where undergrad students could come, and I worked in there. That was like my first go round at private, face to face tutoring. And then I got a few clients on my own, and it just sort of grew from there. Uh, I think I was fortunate that, like I said before, my subject was higher level math, and I was in a city like Miami where there was so many people. It's a big city. If I lived in a small town, maybe I would have had 3 students. Who knows? But I had there was quite a number from which to draw. And yeah, so I left when I left my teaching job. Um, I just like it was really an experiment. I always could have gone back to teaching. You can always
Right,
get a
right,
job as a math teacher. And so so I had, I started building my clientele. It was my that business grew by word of mouth. I did a good enough job, and there was enough demand where parents would say, "Oh yeah, you need a trigonometry tutor, call Kathy." So I was
right.
very fortunate in that way. So yeah, and I was able to that was my living for 25 years in Miami, living in Miami.
Great. You also mentioned, Kathy, that you were kind of disinterested and you were kind of bored doing the SAT, and then you wanted to kind of teach maths from a very different perspective. For the students to kind of take a interest towards a subject as a whole and not just crack tests. So when did this self discovery happen, and how did that happen? I mean, did it happen after you started teaching SAT and then you realized, what, this is not what I want to do, or
Yeah,
you just knew
yeah.
from the start?
I definitely did it. Although, you're not trained in that as a math teacher, but of course you can teach the subject. And so if I had a student, let's say that I was teaching in geometry in 10th grade, and in 11th grade, they needed to start practicing for SAT, their mom might ask me, "Can you do that too? She likes you," whatever. So of course I tried to do it, and I did do it. I definitely did do it. But at some point, I guess I was able to pick and choose what I preferred. I had enough, sometimes when you're starting out, you have to take the business that you get, right? But
Right. Yeah.
after you establish yourself, I can be a little more picky. So I think that's kind of when that happened. I was like, well, yes, I can do it, but I really don't do it. And some parents, I had some families where they had like 3 children, and they were spread apart by like 8 years. And I was tutoring that family for a long time. And you grow close to the family. And, in some cases, the parents would say, like, my daughter doesn't want to do math tutoring with anybody except you. Will you please, do it? And at that point, I would, of course, but I would say, like, it's really, to me, there's not a big magic in SAT tutoring. per se. It's practice, 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 practice. You have to do a lot of practice tests. You have to get good with the calculator. It's a lot of tools, to learn. And I would just tell them, if they have to put in probably 2 to 3 times more hours on their own than tutoring. I can't just sit there and tutor them and magically they're going to do well on the test. So if they agreed to that, I would do it. But like I said, it wasn't inspiring for me, or, I did it just as a job, to make a little extra money. But I don't do it. I don't do SAT anymore, ever.
Got it. But is there a real difference in the money that you get to make by teaching SAT or the kind of math that you teach?
Difference. I think if I had pursued SAT tutoring, as like exclusively, I could have probably made even more money tutoring. There is such a demand for that in certain demographics, let's say.
Right, yeah.
There's these prep schools like the Kaplan and the Princeton Review where kids
Yeah.
go, right, and they have these intensive courses where they have to go like every Wednesday night for 3 hours, and it's a factory. Every student almost is treated the same, even if they're
Yeah.
really bad in math, for example, for math, or really good in math. And it's a cookie cutter solution. So for some kids, it's way better to have a private tutor, but it's also very expensive. I know, I have it's not really a friend, but sort of an acquaintance that does SAT tutoring in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
They charged, this was a few years ago, over $500 an hour.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, there's a price for everything, right? But yeah, there is some insanity in that market, I would say.
Got it, Kathy. So, Kathy, just trying to understand the money aspect, right? I mean, there are some tutors who are, you know what, I can teach you anything in math. You want it for SAT or whatever it is. My time of 1 hour, you got to, if you want to have 1 hour of my time, this is how much you pay, irrespective of what you learn. So, is that how it is with you, or, is it different? When you did it, I know you don't do SAT anymore. But or is it like SAT just kind of for some reason the charges are more?
I charged the same. I did. My hourly fee was pretty nice to begin with, so I didn't see a need. And I also I've had, on the other side of that coin, I've had parents call me with like a young child and ask me, can you teach my student like arithmetic? I'm like, I charge a certain amount because I can handle calculus and differential equations, and you don't need somebody like me to teach a 7-year-old kid how to add. And I'm not going to lower my rate
Lower
because
your price,
of arithmetic, So I even tell them, like, you can find even like a college student to do that. You don't, to do arithmetic, like there's nothing fancy about that. So,
right.
To answer your question, no, I never really changed my rate according to SAT versus non-SAT.
Got it. Got it. And one of the reasons that you also said, if you would have taken the SAT path, you could have, made a lot more money, is because the demand for SAT is a lot more than the normal mathematics. Is that correct?
I think the demand is similar, but in the world that I was in at that time, because of the college prep school where I started teaching and where I got really all my referrals thereafter,
Right.
those families spend a lot of money on education and getting their students into the best schools. And that high school where I taught, 25% of the students went to Ivy League universities. And some of those students were not qualified to go, but their parents got them in, somehow. And part of that is, test prep, and just, that's not an even playing field. You spend thousands and thousands of dollars on SAT prep and your kid's going to do better for sure, but Um, so yes, there is a certain element in the world where, if you get into that group, there is a lot of money there. I don't think that's true if you're just like an average everyday math tutor, but if you have access to those families, yeah, it's very lucrative.
Got it, Kathy. Kathy, you've been doing this for now 25 years, and there must have been a phase, where you kind of had a ramp up time, but then for large parts, you must have found your sweet spot in terms of, having the right amount of students and not having dry times and stuff like that. So, how did you kind of plan all of this to get to a stage where you have a certain predictability when it comes to the amount of money that you can make every month?
Um, I got to the point very shortly after I started my business, I would say maybe 3-4 years in, where I had enough students. With tutoring, with private tutoring, you don't work 9 to 5. You don't work Monday
Right.
through Friday, right? You work after school, on the weekends. So I
Weekends,
can
yeah.
only, if I start at 4 p.m., I can only work till maybe 9 p.m., right? Like, so
Right.
that's
Right.
5 hours. So honestly, like 25 hours a week is a lot for a private tutor
Oh, yeah. Okay.
for me. Because there's just not as many hours that you can fit in the time slots.
Right. Right.
So if I ever got to like around 25 hours, that was really like my sweet spot. And I couldn't even really take I wouldn't have time to do life. I have family, I have a house to clean, there's other things I need to do. So I kind of, and that wasn't that difficult to get a roster of like 25 students. And what I did, and then even demand even grew beyond that, where I had a waiting list. Because like I said, I couldn't really accommodate everybody that was calling me. So, and then I started the supply and demand, like I would raise my rates and say like, well, maybe this will, like
Right. Yeah.
decrease the demand. So I did that a few times. And so I feel like I was just so fortunate with everything that happened. Like I never lacked for business. I never, everything was always fine. The only drawback of being self-employed by that, like that, is if you don't work, you don't make money. So as far as like summer was always slow, but that's the nature of the beast. You hopefully make enough during the school year to carry you through the summer. And sometimes I would have a couple summer school students. So sometimes there would be a little, but I would always assume that I'm not going to earn anything in the summer months, like 3 months, like zero, but that never really happened. So yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. It did. It did. But yeah, I'm gonna have follow-up questions, which is gonna like kind of get more clarity. So you said, you had waiting lists and stuff like that, and you were doing private tutoring for the most part. Did you ever think of maybe accommodating the students that were on the waiting list by making it a group class, if not a lot, maybe 3 to 5 students at the same time?
I thought about it, and I asked parents about it, and they didn't want to do that.
Mm.
They didn't see like what was the benefit to them.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? There were in my tutoring career, there were definitely a handful of times where I taught like 2 students at once, maybe 2 friends that were in the same class that had a test tomorrow, and I couldn't, see both of them, so we did a group session. But it wasn't that common because, like I said, the parents wanted attention, one on one, and that's what they were paying for. I tried. I even had. I tried to outsource a little bit.
Right.
Like would find like a very smart college student or something that maybe could handle the lower level maths. But again, this demographic that was my clientele, they wanted me. They wanted me. I'm the one that had the reputation. I'm the one that had the the good outcomes that they had heard about. So I that never really got off the ground. Like it's just sort of like having a helper.
Right. I was going to ask you this question, but then you kind of touched upon. But I'm going to
Mhm.
ask you this. It's a difficult question, or it's an awkward question to answer. But if you can, look at it from an objective point of view, and I'll help you out by, having a follow-up question to this. Now, you said a lot of people were very specific about wanting you only for, uh, you know, a lot of reasons, and hence you couldn't kind of, have this outsourcing take off. Now, my first part of the question is, why do you think that happened? What are the things that you did right? And secondly, when you look back, in the hindsight, is there something that you could have done differently to have grown your business by hiring more teachers while still maintaining the quality?
That's a very good question. Um, I think because the organic growth of my business through word of mouth and referrals. And remember, this was before Google reviews or before, right?
Yeah,
This was a long time ago when I started. It was just parents talking to each other and saying, "Oh my God, Johnny was failing geometry, and I hired this great math tutor, and who's now getting, he's doing great, and he loves the class." So that kind of referral, they don't want somebody else; they want me to do it. And
mm,
so and also, I think one of the reasons that was the case is because I had worked in that school where 90% of my students were still coming from. I knew the curriculum really well. I didn't have to use even a book to know the material.
right,
So, and I've heard from other students who have had experience with other private tutors where they don't necessarily, they might be good in math, but they don't necessarily know, oh, that teacher, she does things this way. You know what I mean? So I had this institutional knowledge as well as the subject matter knowledge. So I honestly, I know this sounds maybe a little arrogant, but I don't blame the parents for wanting me to be the tutor, you know? Um, and so, and to answer the second part of your question, that knowledge that I had was very hard to impart on somebody else. I could, of course, I could hire somebody that's good in math, but do they know the syllabus, or do they know what, when the trigonometry test comes up, like what that particular teacher is going to want, how they usually test. And so it was really, I tried, I did, but it always came back to like, I can't even, like, I don't even know what to tell these people. I can tell them a few things, but there's still so much in my head. So,
right.
and like I tried to imply when we first started talking, I had a very, really good career in finance. I could have made probably even more money if I had stuck with that. But I'm not really motivated. I like earning money. I like, being financially stable, but that wasn't my motivation. So to grow my business with more tutors like that, it never like was like, oh, I have to do this so I can make more and more and more. I was okay with what I was doing on my own. If that makes
Got it,
sense.
Kathy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, good for you because at least you didn't have to have the dilemma because some people are torn between the two and they get lost in that, right? To be peaceful
Yeah.
while doing this, I think that's nice. Kathy, talking about parents, being specific about wanting a certain teacher, in this case, it's you. And there are two kinds of teachers, right? From what I've seen, there are teachers who are really passionate about what they teach and they don't really intend to put up a show or something. It's just the way they talk about the subject is it's very attractive to the students, or there's something that's happening, which is I believe is what's happening with you. And there is another set of teachers, who are performers, who are good at the subject that they teach, but it's more a lot of other skills that they bring in. They make it so much more engaging or friendly to the students and stuff like that. So ho- am I correct when I say that you would be the first, the former, where you just you're not a performer, or you're not just putting up a show or something. You just happen to like math, and you just talk about it in a different way.
Yeah, I don't think of myself as a performer, but one thing that I always was conscious of doing was being showing a caring side to the student, because a lot of students who get a math tutor are really, they think they're really bad in math, and they have, traumatic experiences from, their past, where teachers have told them that they were stupid, like some really bad stuff. And I
Right.
never, and in order for a student to thrive, you can't have that. You can't make somebody feel dumb, or like, how could you not know that? So even if I might have been thinking that in my head, like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to teach trigonometry when they don't even know, how to multiply or whatever? But I never, let them see that. And so, and as a female, this isn't the case as much anymore, but as a female teacher, a lot of girls, um, like I said, this isn't the case anymore. I think there's more equality in like STEM careers and stuff. But even when I was in high school, my 11th grade math teacher, I was in the higher track, the more advanced track in my high school. But my 11th grade teacher said, he was this old man, really crotchety old man. And he said, um, I don't think you should take calculus in next year, which would have been my senior year, because you'll probably get a C. And I was like an
Wow.
A
Okay.
student. And that just totally discouraged me, because I'm like, I can't get a C, and that wasn't true. I wouldn't have gotten a C. I got an A when I took it in college, but he just discouraged me. And I always thought, like, was that because I was a girl, and he was like this
Yeah.
old
Any idea
fart?
why do you think he would have told you that?
It was so stupid. But so a lot of as a female teacher, a lot of female students feel really comfortable with me,
Mm. Right.
because they've even some of my old students have even said, like, oh, I had this man, he was my tutor, and he, like, he was just mean to me, or he was like really judgmental, and they just didn't feel comfortable with him. So I try to do that, because if a student wants to be with you and feels comfortable with you, that's that's the best thing you could get at, right? Like, versus, oh, I don't want to go to tutoring, mom, because I don't like that guy. Like, they enjoyed their time with me, because I tried to make it, I'm not going to say fun, but at least a safe space for
Right.
them to ask
Right.
questions and everything. So, but no, I don't think I'm a performer at all.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I thought too.
You're
Kathy,
right.
and you started off in the 90s, and I don't know, right now there's a lot of talk about mental health, students having anxiety before tests and stuff like that. Has it always been the case? You having seen students from the 90s, 2000s, and this decade, how do you see this?
That's a good question, and it's one that I often think about. This this learning disability issue, I guess, if that's what we want to call it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I don't know if it existed as much back then, but it certainly is out there, and more. It seems more prevalent, and it might be an awareness thing. It might be a diagnosis thing. I don't, I honestly don't know. That's not my area of expertise necessarily, but I have had a lot of students who have been diagnosed apparently with ADD, and I can tell the difference when I'm sitting with them, if they have taken, like, a lot of them are on medication, Ritalin or whatever the other stuff that people use for that. Um,
right,
I've had some students that seem to have it so bad that I didn't even think that they were listening to what I was saying. Um, they're more disorganized. I mean, I even though I'm not trained in that, like a doctor or
right.
something, I can see it as a teacher. Um, and I feel like that must have always existed, even when I was in school, I'm sure, but it definitely wasn't even an issue that anybody talked about, or
Right.
brought it up as like, well, the student has a diagnosed learning disability. She needs extra time for tests or whatever. Even at the school that I taught at, when I first started teaching there, it was 1993. And I remember that was probably kind of like the beginning of this whole like learning disability discussion. And I remember that year, the head of the school said something like, we're aware that I'm paraphrasing, but we're aware that these issues exist, but nobody in our school has that problem.
Okay.
Which obviously that's not true. And
Yeah.
then fast forward, 10 years later, they face the problem and they start giving accommodations for kids that have documented learning disabilities, like maybe extra time on a test or whatever. So that evolution I saw myself, from when I started a career in teaching to even just 10 years later. Now it's 30 years later almost. But what do you think about that? Because I've talked to other teachers about this too, and it's fascinating in a way, the evolution of that, but it's also a little bit scary.
Okay, if you were to ask me, I've spoken to tutors, who just have, you know, their entire business model is kind of focuses. Like, for example, there is this academy called as No Anxiety Test Prep Academy. Like, they're based out of it. So that's the
Hmm.
crux of that's like equally important as the subject that they teach. And
Interesting.
that's why, I wanted to ask your perspective. And because, as a tutor, have you had to kind of change your methodologies or, tweak the way you teach sometimes, especially in the last decade when you've had to encounter such students?
I I guess I'm not as conscious of it.
Right,
Like I told you, I have sat next to students where I can tell like they're barely paying attention right now. So
right,
I have to get their attention in some way. One thing that I've always done, and I think it's been part of my success as a math tutor, is if I see a student is not understanding my explanation of something, I can try a different way. And sometimes you can have to adjust. Sometimes something might be too abstract and you have to make it more concrete. And that's very typical. That's just typical of teenagers. They can learn better when something is concrete. But with a child that has attention deficit disorder, you have to really be able to adapt quickly
right,
because you have to have their focus more. You have to make sure, than a student that doesn't have that. You don't have to always worry about like, are they paying attention? Like it's default that they are. But
right.
so I've always been able to kind of like try a new way to get them to see it. And I had this was such a long time ago, and this was probably like this student had been diagnosed with dyslexia, and that wasn't that normal. It was kind of like, ooh, this was probably 20 years ago or more. And but she was a brilliant young lady. Like you could just tell like how smart she was. I was teaching her honors geometry, and she would come up with these ways to solve the problem that were so different than like what I was thinking, but yet it worked. And she kind of opened my eyes to that particular learning disability, dyslexia, where I just, I let her kind of run the show more after that when I saw how her brain was working, because I didn't want to like tell her how she had to do it, like, oh, we have to do this proof exactly like this, like let her go. And because she was absolutely such a bright young lady, like it was kind of amazing to see that. But I don't think she had attention deficit disorder. I think she just had dyslexia. So, I've seen it all, and I've tried to adopt my methods, but I don't have training in that. It's just sort of trying to be the best teacher for that
Yeah.
particular student,
Got it, Kathy. And since you asked me, most of the teachers that I talk about this, it just boils down to at least acknowledging and, that there is a problem in front of them. And then just as a human being, what would you do? If you just do those basic things, you don't have to be a doctor or a psychiatrist to, kind of do something different. But just kind of, as you said, a little bit of care and a little bit of human touch kind of does the job. And some of them, come up with basic breathing exercises or, just stuff like that. There's something, one of the guests has told me about box breathing that the American army guys or, the defense people practice to kind of, de-stress themselves immediately.
Oh, okay.
So they do that. So it's like, you inhale and then, wait for 5 seconds, and then you inhale, wait for 4 seconds, and then exhale. It's all 4 seconds, right? Spread over 16 seconds. You inhale over a period of 4 seconds, and then wait for 4 seconds, exhale over a period of 4 seconds, wait for 4 seconds. That's called box breathing, and they say
Okay.
that helps. So teachers kind of use these methods to kind of help their students if they're feeling anxiety or panic and stuff like that during the test. But everybody seemed to acknowledge, and nobody has dismissed it or just that hasn't happened. So it's a thing today. And Kathy, just from the point of view of the aspiring math teachers especially out there, right, what have you done to keep the monotony away from your business? Because you've been there for like 25-30 years now. You've taught maths, and how have you remained motivated, or have you just treated it as work? If you can share your thoughts on that.
Again, I'm a fortunate person because I really love doing it. So,
Right.
For me, it's just time. I have to carve out, a couple hours today to tutor, but to me, it's not, I really enjoy it. And I generally like my students, and I like hearing about their successes down the road. I have a student, my students that I taught are like 40 something years old now. They're like married with
Right.
children, and some of them have taken math, done math careers, others haven't. But I just, just the whole picture is very satisfying to me. And so I really enjoy it. I've had students write me letters, after, thanking me. And I find it very rewarding. And I'm a math nerd at heart. So I like doing it too. Like, give me a calculus problem. That's going to be fun. Let's do it,
Great. And just another question on the same line. So, when you say students kind of prefer you, is it because you kind of, do you prepare and work to, mix or, integrate everyday life into the complex concepts that you teach? Like a
if that's
story.
if that's appropriate. Yeah, I always try to, people can understand complex topics if you can weave it into something that they understand. I love math applications because, the theories are super boring. And a lot of times you're reading a math textbook and they show the theory and nobody even knows what the symbols that they're using mean. So you have to, as a teacher, you went, well, you see this binomial theorem, like it's mumbo jumbo, but here's how it really works. And I always try, especially given my background in finance, and I always try to tell them, oh, well, this particular, exponential growth or whatever, it's used in da 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 da, so, and they
Right.
like,
Right.
students like to hear that, because how many times has a student said, why do I need to know this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I tell them the truth, like, the only reason you need to know this is because you're going to take calculus next year. Like, I can't give you any other reason, but you need it to take calculus.
Got it, Kathy. And the final topic that I'd like to talk about is the tech that's kind of creeped into education today, which is like inseparable, right? You started off teaching, going to students' places, and then at some point you must have started Zoom. I'm sure that was much before the pandemic hit, and then pandemic kind of forced uh, a lot of things. So, how was your first experience? You did Zoom because of the pandemic, or you started teaching online even before that?
Um, I started using Zoom before the pandemic, and it was almost like a happy accident because I probably wouldn't have done it if I was still in Miami. I moved in 2019. No, sorry. I moved in early 2020, but I knew that we were moving from Miami. I live in the west coast of Florida now, in Bradenton, and I knew that I was going to be moving in 2019, but I didn't actually move until 2020. So I was like, well, if I move, I'm going to lose all my students because it's in person, right? So what can I do? So I got Zoom. I bought a Zoom, subscription, and I started experimenting with it with the students that I already had. I said, would you mind like trying this with me? So I
Right.
was luckily pretty well versed with Zoom for almost a year by the time I was, like you said, forced to start using it in like March of 2020.
Yeah.
And I I actually I don't mind tutoring in person anymore, but I see so many benefits to the Zoom tutoring because I use an iPad and an app called Notability and with the Zoom, and like I can, when I share my screen, I'm just writing, if we're working out a problem, and I can email them the notes on the Notability app after we're done. So they have that, so as opposed to like writing on paper and giving them the
Right.
paper, as well as little things like, they don't have to drive or sit in traffic, or, they could be in their pajamas even. These kids are so overworked and overscheduled. A lot of times, like just driving to the tutor and driving home is like an hour of their day. That's valuable, an extra
Yeah.
hour. So, and for me, I love it because I also don't have to like have people in my house or drive to their house, so I think for me, it's great. I've had some students who were so scarred by the year that they spent learning, not being in school and doing virtual school, that they don't want that. So I've got some local clients since I moved 3.5 years ago, and I asked them, do you want to come to my house or do you want to do Zoom? They're like, no, we want to come to your house. So
Right.
if they're local, I give them the option. And I've noticed that like, they're like, they don't want to Zoom if they don't have to. But,
Right. Right.
but it's for me, like I've been able to travel more because I've tutored from probably like 10 countries in the past few years. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's very convenient for me. Not every student loves it, but it's very convenient for me.
Got it, Kathy. Kathy, another thing that I wanted to ask was, you've been teaching. Has it ever crossed your mind to create a recorded course? Because you must have realized at some point, you're spending so much of your time every time. But have you thought of creating assets that could kind of sell itself, like create one recorded course and then put it on Udemy, or sell it? Has that thought ever come? Have you done anything like that?
Yeah, no, I haven't done it, although it has crossed my mind. And honestly, I'm pretty tech savvy for someone my age, but I just every time like I thought about that, like I just didn't cross the hurdle of like actually doing it, and doing, recording the video and uploading it to whatever. So I'm ashamed to say that I never like achieved that, because I'm sure I could. Like I know that there's some lessons that I could put on YouTube or whatever that would be
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never did it. I should.
Got it. Do you have plans of doing that?
I need motivation to do it. Like, what is going to motivate
Right.
me?
Yeah. Why is the big question? Got it. And Kathy, final question or questions, because you've spoken about math in a way that nobody else has spoken. The sense that everybody have been like SAT trainers, and it's mostly about that, the methodologies and stuff like that. But if you have to kind of recommend resources or books for students who need a different approach, instead of just something interesting, are there any books out there you think that will help students kind of get interested in a different way, or even for teachers for that matter?
Were you just talking about SAT or just in general?
In general.
Oh, in general. Uh,
Especially the complicated topics like calculus and
yeah. Um, there are, but you caught me with, I can't recall the names of them at the moment. There's a couple books in my past that I've read, and I just, yeah, I can get it to you, but I can't think of it right now on the top of my head.
No problem. I'm going to email you, and then whenever it
Yeah,
hits your mind, if you can just email, I can put it in the show notes and stuff like that. Kathy, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to
it's
you.
been a pleasure. Thank you.